Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. And tonight, I have a thing or two on my mind. I watched some really intelligent podcasting today. I watched a young man by the name of Robertson Earhart, and I guess he's a graduate student in philosophy. But he's got this YouTube channel called Robinson Earhart, and that's ERHARDT. And he does these nice hour and 15-minute interviews with really interesting people. And I have to say, the thing that I find most refreshing about him is how genuinely neutral he is in a time where neutrality is an almost non-existent thing. Okay? Almost a non-existent thing. Hold on a sec here. Are you kidding me, man? Hold on a sec, folks. I got to get my microphone fixed. But while I'm doing that, I'll leave something to entertain you. So yesterday's podcast went through my my mic on. Oh my God! Is it this simple? Are you kidding me? Is it just not plugged in? Is this what you're telling me? Come on! It can't be that simple. Hang on a sec, folks. I shall return. All right, let's see how that does. Let me just see if I got the right microphone. This should all be taken care of before the show starts. Yep, there we go. All right, so I'm speaking into this mic now. Okay. The technological difficulties. They make the podcast so much fun. Anyways, let's have our fun and games nonetheless.
You heard it right here, folks. 2024, folks.
We're Chinese, first generation. We love Trump from our bottom of the heart because we know Trump is the only one can save America. Kamala is so stupid. She is so low. IQ equal no Q, no qualification to be the president. You shall stay away from that position. You already lost the position. You lost our trust. You lost our vote. You just need to go home, to stay home. You cannot do anything to save America. You are so stupid. You don't know anything. You cannot even answer any question from the camera, from all the media. How you can be on the stage to fight for America, to protect American people, to protect all the world. You are not qualified. You just need to go home. Let Trump to save America, to save the world, to put America first. If America to be strong, to be saved, and then America can save the whole world. Trump, we love you. We love you forever. Never ever surrender. Fight, fight, fight. Fight for Trump. Fight, fight, fight. Fight, fight, fight. Trump, we love you so much, Trump. You are the best president in our lifetime. We so appreciate here as the first generation of the Chinese people. We are so grateful for America, for American people. We are immigrants, but we come from the front door, not from the border. Legally cross the border. We don't welcome those kind of people cross the border to come to America, to destroy America, to kill American people. We cannot allow those people to come to our country anymore. We need a president to protect our
Anyways, I think you get the point. But passionate Chinese lady there. But I had that queued up, actually. That's not random. But I've been thinking about a few things throughout the day. They've been coming and going from my mind. And I wanted to share them with you tonight in a podcast, which I have... Oh, yeah, navigation is down is what I titled this. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes the title keeps me on track, believe it or not. My mind is that much of a wandering mind. The two fellows that were interviewed today, that the two podcasts I watched by Robinson Earhart, were, let me just get my history up here, were Richard Wolff, who's an American professor and a Marxist professor, and his 2-hour interview with Robinson was titled "The Utter Irrelevance of Trump." However, curious about this gentleman is that he is not a Kamala supporter. Go figure. Okay? And the other fellow was Victor Davis Hanson, who took part in an interview that ended up being titled "The Final Case for Trump." And you know, as we've gone through all of this, I mean, together on the podcast, individually, as we cycle through this very harrowing time to be a North American or connected to North America. However, even that is somewhat limited, I think. Perhaps the whole world is feeling this, and we're just so self-centered, as we have been for 80 years, since 1945 and the end of the Cold War, or the end of the World War II. You know, perhaps we're just so self-centered that we don't consider that the whole world is going through this. And that's a very distinct possibility and something that should be considered, because we are an incredibly self-centered people, North Americans. Canadians less than Americans, okay? But that's just because Canadians have an inferiority complex, being the northern neighbor of the most powerful nation in the world throughout the post-World War II era. And America has been the most powerful country in the world throughout the post-World War II era. And we're the same stock. We're mainly Scotch, Irish, English, and French, European stock. But we haven't really been able to do nearly as much as the United States, hence the inferiority complex. Do not laugh at us, Australians. You would have it as well if you lived right beside the United States. Do not laugh at us, New Zealanders. You would have it as well. What these two podcasts taught me was that this election is almost meaningless. And I know that this is contradicting what I've been saying for some time now on the Talamanca Review, that, I mean, it's meaningless, but it's meaningful, okay? How do I reconcile those contradictions, okay? It's meaningful because who you elect is going to determine the near future. It's meaningless because who you elect will not change the fortune of America in any significant way. But have we ever asked ourselves, what is America? And more importantly, who or what could possibly replace America? Or to be more accurate, the Anglo-American Empire. Because the English have been involved in American foreign policy for all this time. They're just very quiet about it, very, just sort of quiet about it. So it's an Anglo-American empire. And if you wanted to be a real stickler, you could say an Anglo-American Italian empire. because the Vatican has been a big part of Washington's rule as well. In fact, there's a chapter on this in the Galactic Historian, and if you want that book, just give me an email. It's Seen That Tinker, just as you see at the bottom of the screen there, minus the number 1, and at Gmail, at Yahoo, or at Proton Mail. Any one of those will come to me, okay? I have Seen That Tinker pretty much across the board. However, I have abandoned the Hotmail account some years ago out of frustration with Microsoft. So it is an absolutely dire election and an absolutely meaningless election at the same time. That's my position. Change my mind. Okay? And to understand my position, you have to understand how I see America. Now, it's very interesting to me that America was a country that reinvented itself generation by generation. Okay? It literally reinvented itself every generation. Let's call a generation 20 years. I know technically, biblically, it's probably closer to like 33 years. But that would mean that you want 3 generations alive at the same time. So you'd have grandchildren at 33, parents at 66, and grandparents at 99. So I'm not quite sure that 30, let's say 20, okay? No need to get bogged down on little details here. But let's say that we have a generation every 20 years. If you were to do a forensic audit of America, its intellectual capital, its patents, the things it created and the things it produced post-World War II, you would come to the same conclusion that was pointed out to me a number of years ago by a friend of mine. I've mentioned it, not by name, but I've mentioned him by social or ethnic identity on my podcast before. This was one of my first Russian Jewish friends. And for those of you who've never known a Russian Jew, they're a very unique kind of person. There's to be Jewish and to go through the Russian experience for 6 or 7 generations, where the generation is 33 years, not the 20 years I've co-opted for the convenience of my argument. There's a special kind of resilience that developed in Russian Jews, and a very distinct interpretation of the Jewish canon, and a very, very distinct expression of not only Jewish, but universal esoterica or metaphysics. And many of you who listen to me are probably acquainted, not personally, but nonetheless acquainted with at least one Russian Jew. Can you think who that might be? Da 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 da. Helena Blavatsky. Okay, the Secret Doctrine author. And probably the great-grandmother of the New Age movement. Okay? Helena Blavatsky moved to London and did what I would call one of the biggest data dumps in history. She literally introduced a whole bunch of esoteric material to the British populace that they were previously unaware of. At least not in any public way. I would point out that Chabad Lubavitch, the Jewish sect that is ultra-Orthodox, an ultra-Orthodox sect within an Orthodox sect, which is the Hasidic Jews, Chabad Lubavitch distinguishes itself even more with an even more ascetic disposition, okay? In terms of orthodoxy, how you dress, how you eat. I mean, Jewish orthodoxy is like eating at the British royal family's table at Buckingham Palace. Jewish orthodoxy it's just through the roof. Okay, what spoon do you use with the soup? What spoon do you stir your coffee with? What glass do you drink the champagne out of? What glass do you drink the wine out of? Where's my water glass? Why are these plates all stacked one on top of the other? That's Jewish orthodoxy. But in the example of Buckingham Palace, you're only going to be shown to have less than the highest standards in table manners if you don't know what you're doing. In Jewish orthodoxy, you will be perceived to be infected and evil if you don't adhere to their rules. They're quite severe. So Chabad Lubavitch, while not distinctly Russian, one of its biggest footprints in the world now is in Russia, and it did emerge out of the Eastern Bloc. So under the Tsars, under the Prussian Empire, and then through communism and all of that sort of stuff, okay? That is where Chabad Lubavitch percolated, okay, in Eastern Europe. Very fascinating. It never ceases to amaze me how I get lost in these stories inside of stories. And I go, how did I even get onto this? And I got to remember. So, my Russian Jewish friend, very, very smart guy, PhD, he said, Bruce, if you study American history closely, you will find that every major invention that has bolstered the treasury came about from a first-generation immigrant. And I went, Igor, are you kidding? I don't believe that. Cursory internet investigation. A week later, I said, yeah, you're pretty much right there. So again, we go back to this question, what is America? Okay? What is Canada, for that matter? What is Australia? What is New Zealand? Okay? And here we're talking mainly about the countries that are British satellites. You know, they're definitely satellites of Britain. If there was no England, there would be no America, no colonized America. Okay? If there was no England, there would be no colonized or fully colonized Canada. Or it would be French, which would be even worse, in my opinion. No England, no Australia. It was originally a penal colony, right? You got sent to Australia. And New Zealand as well. All right? No England, no New Zealand. So it's very interesting how these societies evolved. Now, with the exception of the United States, which had a revolution, all of them were pretty much, and are in many ways, still very much influenced by the mother country, Britain. Now, we make a lot of show about this, like, you know, we're decolonized, we're completely independent states now, but I don't think it's true. I think money is still sent back to Britain. I think the Lieutenant General is still a fairly important position, and not in the American system, I'm talking about in the Commonwealth system. It's usually the person who reports back to the royal family, in this case, King Charles. That's hard to say, actually, eh? King Charles, you know. I haven't noticed any changes on money, but then again, why would I? I don't see any Canadian money over here. But what was a little bit different about these countries is, and let's be honest about this, okay? Because I don't need jingoism, patriotism, racism, or ethno-nationalism to interfere with a good thesis. And for that, we need to be honest. These societies have been massive experiments since their inception. With every 10, 15, or 20 years, new waves of immigrants coming in. Okay? So it's reached a pitch now where cities like I heard, and this is probably true, but I heard that there are more languages spoken in Toronto, Canada, than any other city in the world. Now, I want you to stop and think about that for a second. Okay? Because it's an amazing thing to contemplate. Everywhere else you go in the world, there might be 1, 2, maybe 3 languages spoken, and there will be one language which is completely dominant. Okay? Now, this is not to say that English is not the dominant language in the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. But we're at a tipping point now where language dominance may shift. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll say one more thing before I abandon this point. When you go to an ATM machine in Toronto now, the language selection, there's like 6 or 7 languages you can choose from. English, French, Mandarin, Korean, Japanese, Spanish, Arabic. I'm not joking. I mean, it must be a massive exercise to program these machines and program them for all this redundancy as well. Okay, because that's all redundancy. Okay, so everything you do on a computer now has to go through a language filter in Canada. Okay? I've been away for 10 years, so I don't know for sure, but I would strongly suspect that there are multiple languages on voting ballots as well. Now, the reason this is interesting is because, going back to the opening volley of this podcast, navigation is down. I think I heard that on a Star Trek episode. Navigation is down, Captain. But what's interesting about this is almost every other place in the world speaks one language. Okay? And really, language and nations have always been linked together. So England is English. Spain is Spanish. Japan is Japanese. Korea is Korean. China is Chinese. Right? But you don't say Canada, Canadese. What do they speak in Canada? Well, they speak Canadese. What do they speak in Australia? They speak Australiaese. No, the countries were founded on a transplanted language. Okay? By immigrants. And the first people in set the language. Now, for years and years, it would have been a handicap for people to come to the country and have to learn a language, to work and to function. It's not the end of the world. I've done it twice. I learned Mandarin in Taiwan, and I've learned Spanish over here. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be writing books in Mandarin or Spanish, but I have, in a legitimate way, I have learned another language. Okay? Like, legit. I speak Spanish. Right? I read Spanish very well. I can read some of my favorite authors in Spanish. I can read Gabriel Garcia Marquez in Spanish. I can read Pablo Neruda in Spanish. A great romantic poet. Okay? Anyways, I digress. So we're talking about language here. And this is a very important point. Languages define a people. I told you already, I was absolutely astounded to find out that the Quebecers have their own written language. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you the degree to which that blew my mind. That a group of people so small would come up with their own written and spoken language so that they could write down what they were thinking and they could speak it. And I can tell you, after mixing with these people, that preserving their language and their culture is extremely important to them. Now, why is that? First of all, before we answer that question, let me give you a few examples of what I mean. I live in a very small community. It's called Dos Ramas. In fact, I will show you all where I live, because I have this wonderful thing called the internet. Maybe I'll show you some pictures. So this is the closest town to me. This is Bataan, Costa Rica. Yeah, I was able to add my mic there. Okay. So this is the, let me see if I can get these pictures blown up a little bit. No, not really. This is not really the town. Okay, yeah, there's the town there. New sustainable housing. There's a good one. So that's what it looks like from above, I guess. I guess that's a drone shot or something. But let me continue to... I'll come back to this. I'll get it done. I'll come back to it. Now, I was absolutely blown away by the fact that the Kebakar have their own written language. Now, we have a small community up here. My community is called Dos Ramas, which means 2 branches, is what the translation is, 2 branches. And I'm not quite sure what the population is up here. It might be, it's not even really on the map. I mean, there's some schools and stuff. Well, there's one school. And it serves a bunch of kids, and they can go from several different ages, and they're all in one room, right? It doesn't matter whether you're 14 or whether you're 8. The teacher has to sort of cope with all of these things. Yep, here we go. All right, so I'm going to show you again, okay? So this is what's called Escuela Dos Ramas. That's, I think, that's me. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Come on, give me a picture, will you? Yeah, there's me, Old McDonald's farm. Let me see if I can give you... yeah, so that's, you can't really see the mountains. There's the school, there's my house. It's about a 10-minute walk to the school. You can see by the chart down here, it's 500 meters. I should have Google Earth this. But anyways, what's done is done. Okay, so this is my house. This is my neighbor there. He's got some agriculture there. So let me see how close in I can get here. This is the church. This is, the pastor keeps a house up here. He just comes up here to mainly fast and pray. So this is me. So this is my main house. This is my little office, a separate building. This is the bathroom. This is the guest house in the back. And it's all quite nice. I may as well just use Google Maps to do Bataan as well. Madre de Dios, Rio Hondo. Yeah, there's Bataan. So this is the most dangerous town in Costa Rica. Very small population, and they've got, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 10 murders a week. Okay, and yes, it's that many. Okay, this little town here. And remember how I told you they call everything barrios over here? Barrio La Fila, Barrio Cenizado, Barrio Costa Rica, and there's the town, Bataan. And so I live way up here in the mountains, like way up here, about 15-20 kilometers away. So I don't have to worry about all the craziness. That's the Mother of God River there. It flows right behind my house. On heavy rainfalls, you can hear it too. That's all the side of a mountain. That's the side of a mountain that collapsed, believe it or not, okay? So anyways, where was I going with all this? So in this little space in the middle of nowhere, we have a native group that has its own written and spoken language. I showed you the little, well, maybe I'll do that again. The Escuela dos Ramas. So we have a little school here. Here it is right here. Let me see if I can get in a little bit closer. Yeah, that's the school, okay? That's the lunchroom. That's the schoolhouse. There it is. There you see a little picture. Oh, geez, I'm not even showing you. Hold on a sec. There you go. So that's the schoolhouse there. That's my neighbor Nago's farm. We cut through here to go into the jungle and to go to one of the walking points to the reserve. And the reserve is way up here. Like this is all reserve land back here. This is where the natives live. That's cultivated reserve land right there. Pretty cool, eh? So it used to be that the native kids came down to the school in Dos Ramas and they studied in Spanish. But they don't want their kids to lose the Quebecer language. So they had their own school built on the reserve, and they asked for donations. I donated some money. I think I donated like $1,200, I think, something like that. They got their school built, and then all their kids go to school on the reserve now. Except there's a few exceptions. It's kind of created a little bit of tension in the tribe. But my point is, what are these people fighting for? Okay, why do they not want the Quebecer language to be lost inside of Spanish? Why is it that people hold on to these things so strenuously? Okay? The penultimate example of this, of course, being the Jews, who've maintained Hebrew and Yiddish. By the way, the only two places in the world with languages Jews speak are at war now. So Yiddish came out of the Ukraine, and Hebrew is Israel. So if anybody says that these aren't Jewish wars, you look them in the eye and you say, hey, Bruce McDonald told me. So we got these cultures that are struggling and struggling and struggling to hold on to their language and hold on to their identity. And then you got all these people who are willing to give it up, get on a boat or get on a plane or walk, which is a preferred method of emigration now, all the way up some perilous passageway, culminating in an absolutely perilous piece of land called the Darien Gap to get from South America to Central America, which literally translates to get from Colombia to Panama. Panama is the southernmost country in Central America, and Colombia is the northernmost country in South America. And walk all the way up to the United States of America, where they will not have a language, where they will have to learn a new language, or will they? This is the question. But here's what I'm getting at. I've touched on this in indirect or in passing in previous podcasts, but I've never just sort of stopped and addressed the topic. For 80 years now, so if we go with my 20-year model for a generation, so for 4 generations, from 1945 to 2024, almost 2025, which will be 80 years, the United States has been the de facto leader of the world. It's been the economic engine. It has been the proliferator of globalization. And this globalization that's coming in is very much the Anglo-Jewish version of globalization, which is usury and centralized banking. Okay? And that's an Anglo-Jewish enterprise. It begins with the Bank of England, okay? The alternatives were communism, which is, I don't think they worry too much about monetary policy and stuff like that the way we do in other economies, but they don't have to, right? Because they control everything. And at the end of the day, all they've got to promise is a little bit of food and a shelter for everybody. It's not a high benchmark to hit. Now, everywhere you go in the world, there's one people and one language. So if you go to Botswana, there's the Botswanian people and there's the Botswanian language. Let me just check on my facts here. Let's say Kenya. Language. Kenya. Swahili and English are the 2 official languages. So there's... Now, why would Kenya be learning English? Okay? So you hear these stories. I'm leading up to something here, okay? Do you really think the whole world is going to learn Mandarin to do business with the Chinese? You only get one kick at the can at this. Okay, so people gave up unless language becomes obsolete, unless technology reaches a point where you can clip something onto your shirt and put an earpiece in and have a completely coherent conversation with somebody in 2 different languages. They speak to you, your microphone picks it up, your earpiece translates it to English. This is what he's saying, okay? Kind of like the United Nations, where everybody's got the earpieces in. It could happen, but I'm doubtful. And I'm doubtful for the following reason. Language is not only the conveyor of information, it is the conveyor of feeling. Very often, somebody who is an artistic speaker says more in what they don't say than what they do say. It's their facial expressions. It's the way a word is pitched. It's the way their poetry is written. All of these things go into creating a language. Now, the world has just spent 4 generations learning an official second language. A second language that is spoken in Saudi Arabia, a second language that is spoken in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, all over the world. They're not speaking Russian. They're not speaking Ukrainian. They're not speaking Hebrew. They're not speaking Mandarin. They're speaking English. Okay? Now, in my thesis tonight, navigation is down. It's my belief that it's impossible to turn this around at this point. But more importantly, the world accepted U.S. leadership because the U.S. was the world. So if somebody living in Kenya wanted to know if what they were hearing coming out of the United States was real, hey, is this true? Is there really all this opportunity here? Are they really hiring construction workers at $35 an hour? They could pick up a phone, or they could send an email in 2024 to a friend or family member from their region of Kenya who emigrated to the United States and say, tell me what it's like. And that person could tell them what it's like in their language and in ways they could understand. And it builds a trust bridge. Okay? It builds a huge trust bridge. Same thing for the Koreans, same thing for the Japanese, same, like that clip I started the show with. Undoubtedly, that's a woman who escaped Mao's China. She knows. If you want to know the threat China poses, listen to Chinese Americans who are not co-opted by Chinese intelligence. They'll tell you. They're saying it pretty clearly. It's popping up all over the place now. Okay? Now, this is just the way the world evolved, and you can't really fight it. It just is what it is, and only a fool would fight it, okay? Makes no sense to try and fight it. So the world is America, and America is the world, and it's the same thing for Canada, and it's the same thing for Australia. We are countries of immigrants, meaning that we have been since the get-go, at least in the case of Canada, and I suspect the United States as well, because a lot of the early immigrants were Dutch. And they may not have spoken English, they may have spoken Dutch. But in Canada, there were two distinct languages. There was French and English that were the two founding languages. And it's a sore point that goes on to this day. The language kerfuffle between the English and French. Canada spends, I think, $1 or $2 million a day on translations. Okay, so that's, let's say it's 2 million. That's just under $1 billion a year. For a population of 37 million people, we're spending just under $1 billion a year on French to English and English to French translations. It's an entire cottage industries for Quebecers who learn English. They become professional translators for the federal government. It's like a make-work program to keep the French in Confederation. Okay? Where am I going with this? Navigation is down. So the whole world is in America, the whole world is in Canada, the whole world is in Australia, or great measures of it. At the very least, I can't. Australia is the one I can speak least accurately for. But what is interesting about these countries and why they were the ones chosen to step toward globalization is that they allowed people to think in a way that escaped the limitations of their land and their language. There's this other place in the world I can go, where all the dreamers go. And it's a land of opportunity. It's a land where I can be anything I want to be. Right? This is the American mythos since World War II. Right? Tolerant, liberal, a kind of a magnet for a lot of different kinds of people, especially creative people, especially adventurous people. But the point I'm making in context to Navigation is Down, tonight's podcast, is that the first form of globalization the world saw were nation states not rooted to one language or culture. I'm doing the long pregnant pause because I want you to think about that for a sec. Because that's a very important thing I just said. The first instantiation of globalization were nation states not rooted to one language or land. So people from other lands and other languages would come into this melting pot. Now the question on my mind tonight, and the question that I flirted with all day today, was this a setup from the beginning? Now that these countries of multiculturalism, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States, have served their purpose, are they being flushed down the toilet like turds? It sure seems that way, because they've affected globalization, but the globalization that they seem to be preferring now is alienating all the countries that brought it about. Not only alienating them, but systematically decimating and desecrating them and their populations. Okay? And that's something to consider. So we did all the legwork for globalization. Free trade was a concept that began in North America. You could say, if you're an astute observer of global politics, you could probably make the case that the first country to form regional trading blocs based on legally binding contracts was the Japanese. And that North America responded to Japanese trading blocs and the Japanese Free Trade Initiative to create an economy of scale that could compete with them. And when you get into foreign affairs, and I was raised in it in the nation's capital, you hear a lot of this language. It's like a chess game where your move is forced. Well, my opponent moved his bishop here, meaning I wanted, before he did that move, I was going to move this piece here. But because he did that move, I now have to move this piece here. You hear that a lot in the world of foreign affairs and diplomacy and economics. You hear it a lot. Well, the Japanese did it. Okay, so what's the significance of that? Well, they're going to create an economy of scale that will allow them to sell more units of a product. And then they can, when they create a larger economy of scale, what they can then do is reduce their price. And once they reduce their price, if we can't compete with the economy of scale, we go out of business and they dominate the market. There's always this knife to your throat in economics, in capital economics. Okay? I grew up with this. And I intuitively knew it wasn't right from the beginning. But I could only have so many fights with my father, right? And so sometimes you just kind of like don't bring it up. But he was an evil man. He turned out to be evil. He died evil. And not completely, but, you know, he's doing better on the other side now. But my mom is still completely evil. And these people are just saturated with it because they took it in through their pores. Right? You got to fight evil. And you got to fight that which rationalizes evil. Back on track. Navigation is down. So we're now looking at a situation where globalization is looking a lot more like languages and peoples working together at a global level in a global economic structure, specifically alienating the multicultural societies. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. Go figure. I mean, how did that happen? Okay? Now, in the two podcasts I watched today, the Marxist economist argued that the American empire is over, but every Marxist has wanted the American empire to be over since World War II. They never even wanted it to begin, so you can almost chuck everything a Marxist says out the window. Okay? Victor Hansen, who argued in favor of a Trump presidency. By the way, he did not vote for Trump in 2016. He's one of the many converts now. His argument is simply that Kamala Harris is not intellectually competent enough to represent the United States, and I agree. Can you imagine that dimwit crack whore representing us in negotiations with the Japanese or the Russians? You know, with the porn star laugh? And that's what it is. The way she laughs is that's the way whores laugh. I grew up with them. Because deep down they're always ashamed, so they just project it with this laughter. Right? And he's probably right. Here's what I think, and here's how I'm going to sum up this rather cumbersome podcast. I think people who live together need to dream together. What do I mean by that? I mean, there has to be a common spiritual goal to the society. You have to have gods. Okay? There has never been an instance of a people living on the planet without gods. There are no atheistic tribal peoples. You can say they're pantheistic, you can say they're animistic, you can say they're pagan, but they believe in something beyond their own lives, which is the beginning of spiritual reality, right? What we did wrong in these multicultural societies is we allowed ourselves to believe that we could survive without a common center. Now, the common center for the longest time was prosperity. Everybody make money, everybody happy. The Vietnamese national motto. Sorry, that was a bit racist. I do that sometimes because I'm a Gen Z. You want to hear it one more time? Everybody makes money, everybody's happy. And that's what drew people in. So what's going to happen to these societies when the prosperity is gone? I mean, everybody left their language and their land. Something the Quebecers are fighting tooth and nail to keep by taking what limited funds they have to build a school on their reserve because the government won't even give them money, sufficient money to build a school on their reserve. Okay, so this group of Quebecers up here are maybe 1,000 people. Maybe 500 to 1,000 at most. 1,000 is probably a tad hyperbolic. So what are they going to do? They're fighting for that language. They're fighting for that land because they're connected to both. Okay? Here's what I think. I think what comes next corrects all the nonsense I've spoken about tonight. And I can't tell you what that's going to be because I don't know. But what I can tell you is that these are systemic problems. That you cannot live this way. Be honest with yourself. Okay? If you live in the United States or Australia or Canada and you're listening to me, look around at all the people you know. And ask yourself if those are grounded people, grounded in a language, grounded in a land, grounded in their gods. And the answer is no. Most people living in these first world societies are actors in a script they're not even aware of. They don't know who wrote it. They don't know who's directing it. They don't know what their lines are. Well, they get their lines from TV and magazines and from other people. That's what teaches them what to say. It's like when they put a microphone in front of these retarded, almost gendered out 18, 19-year-olds who are at a Kamala Harris rally. I played one a number of podcasts back. Why are you voting for Kamala Harris? Because Trump won't let me be me. And then they go like this to show themselves, and the piercings, and they're halfway through some gender transition. I don't think Trump has any inclination to stop transgenderism if people want to do it and pay for it. I don't think he has any idea about that at all. Right? So again, we're back at the paradox of the 2024 election. It's probably the most meaningful election in decades, maybe the history of the United States, and at the same time almost meaningless because neither one of the protagonists or the potential leaders, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, are talking about anything real. Or any of the things I spoke about tonight. How do you preserve? I guess Trump is kind of on the right track. Like he knows, like you gotta have prosperity to make these multicultural societies work. No prosperity, the people start to go wonky because there's no culture to fall back on. Over here, there's culture. You know, my wife doesn't work. She's never worked in her life. I mean, she does like volunteer work up here, and she works for the municipality now. She got elected. But there's like 2 meetings a month. And now normally a person living in Toronto or New York or Los Angeles who didn't work, if they didn't have a nearly limitless supply of disposable cash, they would not know what to do with themselves. Or they'd be homeless, or they'd be this, or they'd be that. Over here they have culture. You would be amazed how many gaps culture fills in. We don't have it anymore in the West. It's not going to a coffee shop and talking to your friends. You know, I think Seinfeld, the TV show, it was probably the best representation of the death of American culture. It was really, they say the show was about nothing. I say it was a long eulogy for the United States of America. The death of, this is how stupid, banal, and meaningless we have become as a people. Okay? And they weren't doing it in a clever way. I mean, I think Jerry caught on near the end and tried to correct it for moral reasons, but he's really that stupid, that vapid, and that shallow himself. Okay? Now I left, and I adapted, and I morphed into another culture. I learned a new language. I learned a new way of living. I eat a new cuisine. Not all of you are going to do that. But I can tell you right now, no matter who wins that election, there's no culture coming back. And there may never be, with the levels of immigration going on now in Canada and the United States, there may never be cultures in those countries. Real cultures. You could say there's microcultures. You know, you get Cinco de Mayo celebration, stuff like that, microcultures. But they're not really cultures. Cultures take place in a language, and they take place on a land. We gave that up a long time ago with the Admiralty system. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talent